Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending from where you're watching us. It's a pleasure to be here on Stadio, here in Barcelona, with such a distinguished panel of speakers. Today, now this session is, as you have seen, is on predictability. Where's my cargo in the area of disruptions? And I think we have a very good combination here on stage of different actors and online as well, different actors, shipping lines, ports, shippers that can tell us a little bit what has happened in recent times and what could we expect for the coming future. This is a panel session of 45 minutes, so the way we have organized it is an introduction of each panelist of around five minutes. Please stick to the time as much as possible. And then we're going to try to have a Q&A session for the remaining time of the session. So with no further ado, I'm going to give the floor first to our online speaker, Mr. André Simha from MSC, who is online with us, I hope. So if you can hear us, if you can see us, the floor is yours. Please, go ahead.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Jordi?
Perfectly well. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to start my 5-minute timer because I tend to speak a lot. So thank you very much for having me on this panel. I apologize. I am remote. It's a bit of a complicated week, but look, essentially, I've been involved with technology since the early days of home computing. So you can guess my age. That was back in the 80s, and there I was trying to, convince shop owners to dedicate a section of their retail space to home computing. And it's a little bit the same as what I have to do today at MSC, responsible for leading and executing the company's overall digital transformation and innovation strategy, and convincing people about the benefits of digital. I also serve as the chairman of the supervisory board of the DCSA, the Digital Container Shipping Association. So let me dive in. And the question we discussed previously was, where's my cargo? And I think this is what a lot of customers are asking themselves, and it's perhaps the main question under normal times, and of course even more during the COVID and the congestion. So presented like that, it's a very simple question, right? But there's many more questions that follow. Where do I find the information? Do I have to call my agent? Do I need to go to a platform that I'm using for multiple carriers? Do I have to go to the carrier's website? When will I get the information? When will I know when my cargo is arriving? Will I be informed if something unexpected happens so that I can react quickly? We don't need 100% of the data all the time, but we need the data when it needs to be actioned. So what does the information really mean? And I was listening to the previous conversations. Do the locations, events mean the same thing across all the stakeholders? Do terminals, ports, and shipping lines use different denominations? They do. So how is the information updated? Is it accurate? Is it up to date? Is it actionable? I think these are key questions in my view. So what are we doing at MSC to approach this topic is, first of all, we contribute to data sharing platforms, TradeLens, GSBN, E2Open, and of course we invest in our own e-business platform, MyMSC, because we're conscious that customers need to use various platforms, and we have to make sure that we provide the data where it's needed. Of course, we also have direct integrations. We have many big BCOs, freight forwarders, using our track and trace APIs, for example. And here the idea is to have a more dynamic feed and better integration into the customer's operation systems. We also have customers that are using our smart containers, and there they have the added benefit of more real-time information on the cargo location, some delays that could have occurred, And the goal here is to increase traceability and predictability. Of course, because standards are key, with DCSA, we're developing these standards so that we do use the same language eventually between shipping lines and other players. And, that's really great. But now we have to make sure that we implement them together. And I heard a lot about togetherness and collaboration on the previous panel. We're also following very closely the just-in-time initiatives, the port call pilots, proof of concepts, and other collaborative initiatives with ports, governments, and associations. You have the Flow Initiative, FMC Initiative, digital corridors between different countries, and many more. And these are extremely interesting. And this all contributes in the end to give better visibility, better predictability to shippers during the cargo journey, and also to the other actors involved in the supply chain, including, of course, ports and terminals. And I now have 40 seconds left. So as a closing remark, today is an important day because according to the UN, the world's population has just reached 8 billion people. Not sure about those numbers, but that, in my sense, gives us 8 billion reasons to continue the digitalization in shipping, because the growing population means more cargo traveling the world, and digitalization is, of course, key to the sustainable global trade. So in 2050, we'll be close to 10 billion people. Maritime trade volumes are set to triple by then, again, according to the OECD's prediction. And it's also the net zero target for some of the big shipping lines. So digitalization in shipping is better for business, better for the people, and better for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, André, so much. It's nice to hear from what has become today the first shipping line in the world, quite recently, in terms of capacity at least, its plans when it comes to visibility, traceability, et cetera, et cetera. So now let's change the focus now into port authorities, okay, which is another obviously very important actor when it comes to predictability of supply chains and also transparency. No? So as you have seen, I have here on my right-hand side Andrew Hamilton from Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, who will be next, and he will give the views from the port. One of the most known ports in North America in terms of environment, sustainability, and also a very important actor when it comes to smart port issues. So please, Andrew, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jordi. Yeah, first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity to speak in this forum and share our journey at the Port of Vancouver. So just in terms of predictability, enabling predictability of supply chain is through digitization is a high priority for the Port of Vancouver. In our learnings, we've discovered 3 factors that have driven the need for predictability. The first one is the shift from supply chain to demand chain. And I think over the past 20 years, we've seen supply chains, the automotive sector in particular, has really been sort of the model for supply chains, focusing on just-in-time inventory and leaning. But over the past decade, we've seen a rise in the model from the retail sector, which is really focused on, has really been transformed from because of online shopping and omni-channel. So previously, retailers would push their inventory into a distribution center and then push it into a store. And then, but now with omni-channel, cargo can be in transit, but they have no idea where that end customer is. So companies like Amazon, Walmart, others have really started to leverage digitization and digital technology to sort of determine where they can predict or anticipate that cargo should go. So it's really sort of predictive analytics are a really sort of key strategic consideration. The second factor that we've focused in on is the shift from, volatility as becoming sort of new normal. And I think we've all sort of experienced the impact of COVID on supply chain. And I think the learnings for many of us in that sort of situation was, the trade and transportation network cut back their capacity when they anticipated an economic slowdown by 20–30%. And then we have consumers which are suddenly not spending the money on experiences, start buying online. And again, 20–30% bump in terms of the demand, and we've been living with the experience of that over the past 3 years in terms of the bullwhip effect of that. You know, in terms of the other one in climate change, I think the impact that we've sort of experienced, certainly on the West Coast, is especially the past 2 years, is a lot of, I would call them catastrophic climate change events, and those are floods and fires, which have been unprecedented and caused outages in the trade and transportation sector. So that these situations create an opportunity for the trade and transportation networks, shippers, suppliers to come together and come up with better forms of resiliency and recoverability. The third learning that we've had, or key factor that we've identified, is data-driven decisions. And we see that this is going to play more and more of a role, not only in terms of enhancing the optimization of operations at the gateway and the handoff between different modes, but also this data-driven understanding will inform critical infrastructure investments going forward. So I guess the question in sort of sum for us is, what's the role of the ports? And I think for the Port of Vancouver, we see ourselves as playing a critical role in terms of developing the digital infrastructure for all the gateway partners to take advantage of. And then the other one is really sort of creating a culture of trust and trying to enhance data exchange between the supply chain partners. So those are sort of the focuses for us. Thanks.
Okay, Andrew, thank you so much for these useful insights and this introduction. Now we have the views from a shipping line, we have the views from a port authority, we'll have the views from another port authority a little bit later, but now I'm going to shift the focus into the end customer, the shippers. So I have here with me, as you have seen, Jordi Espin from the European Shippers Council. He has been very active in the last 2 years. The European Shippers Council has been very active in denouncing a little bit, the loss of reliability, of predictability of supply chain for its associates, for customers, for shippers. So let's hear from him. What do you think, where the cargo is now in this area of disruptions that we have seen in the last couple of years? The floor is yours, Jordi. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. And thank you also for inviting me to be here today. Thanks a lot. I mean, to us, in fact, I'm focusing only on maritime transport. May seem a bit reductionist because we think that we need to broaden the scope. I mean, before me, Andrew was telling that the demand chain is going into the supply chain is more going into a demand chain, and we think that this is going also further on into a trust chain. So the trust chain, in fact, doesn't exist without ordinary operations that work well. Not sending space rocket ships to Star Trek or whatever it is. Let's go back to the basics. And to do that, we need standards. And I see here André, well, it's here behind me, André. That's good to say hello to you from the CSA, because we started cooperation between the European Shippers Council and the CSA in order to build standards so that we all understand each other in the same universal language without emotions, and that's very important. Also, one of the points that are very much needed is that we need to define metrics, because what we say today from customers that the supply chain or the maritime supply chain is not working well, it's easy for us to say blank sailings, very bad, very bad, very bad. But let's agree on which metrics really define the reality on the supply chain, and let's remove emotions. Because in fact, what we want is not to talk about shippers. Shippers should be removed from Earth. Cargo is there. So we need to prioritize cargo to flow. And that's extremely important. And also, on this point, there are some points that we think that roles can develop really a role. Ports should become the transparency agents of new KPIs. Agreement KPIs like cleaning of containers or other supply chain metrics like whatever it is concerning cooperation, no-shows, equaling them to rollovers or controls of reliability. What does this mean? Because this becomes abstract. So let's say that we need to define metrics, we need to work on standards, and from the Global Shippers Alliance, which is the alliance of global shippers that we will also represent, at at local level, at the European level, and also at global level, we have just published a manifesto on the Bill of Cargo Rights. Cargo should have rights, although they don't complain. So when cargo is delivered to a customer, to a port, to a truck driver, to whomever it is, to customs, it always delivers richness, but it never complains. So why do we treat cargo like we do? So it's important that we follow this Bill of Cargo Rights manifesto that we have just published at the Global Shippers Alliance, and why we tell some kind of manifesto that we need ports to disseminate it, and of course, to legitimate it, which is very, very important in order to build the trust chain and the demand chain that we are telling. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. I like this idea of the Bill of Cargo Rights. It reminds me, always say that sometimes they, politicians, no, they don't listen to the demands of cargo freight because they are not persons. No? If we give them the rights, no, maybe they might sometimes listen a little bit more. Okay.
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. So I'm going to give the floor now to Christopher Chase, Port of LA, who has been on the front pages for the last couple of years, unfortunately, I guess, for them, but also because they have increased a lot in traffic in the last 2 years. So now the situation in the port is much better than it used to be 1 year ago. So Christopher, give us your insight on the topic. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you very much, and it's much appreciated to be here in Barcelona. It's always a pleasure to now get back out and about. It's for many years of sitting not doing this, it's been quite an exciting opportunity to get out here and see my colleagues from around the world. Wonderful thing to do here. For the Port of LA, you know, we started, as you mentioned, the disruptions that have happened in the last couple of years, unfortunately for us, aren't the first disruptions we ever had. And some of our where's our cargo mentality came out of really the 2014, 2015 timeframe, where we had some other disruptions, just more based in Southern California. And heading into a digital mindset, changing the way we are doing some things as a landlord port. We're not operating, we're the landlord, but a passive landlord doesn't work. And that is kind of the mindset we took, and we took some very significant steps because we know the data's out there. We know somebody knows where the cargo is at all times. The question is, do the right people know it, or the people who need to act on it, do they know it? And that's kind of the approach we took. And we worked together and with a partnership with GE at the time, now Wabtec, and you might have heard it before, the Port Optimizer, which is our version of this. But it's really the idea of a system of systems. It's the ability to see cargo wherever it is. And it seems to me in our digital realm, it's often the terminal side where we have the most struggles of getting that right information to the right people. And that leads us into a number of different areas that, of course, we discovered in all this. But we've been able to direct people to the right location. And this current disruption, I don't know if we could have made it through as we did without this. There was so much information that we've been using that we were pushing out. You know, yes, we're in the media a lot, but we did it because we had the information. And without that information, I don't know how we would have done it. And I can tell you from personal experience, myself and my colleagues, we ended up being, to a certain degree for people, their customer support. People called us at last resort, where is my cargo? And we had people calling, but from a shipper's point of view, from the biggest retailers we can think of, or biggest shippers, to somebody who ships a couple containers a year. And they all need that help. And I had the ability to get a majority of this on one screen on my desktop, whether it be at my house or at the office, wherever I was, or on vacation for that matter. And that is a different mindset that we've had here. And I think part of it is this digital realm, and then what we have done in terms of where's my cargo. The idea is we have some standardized requests that we have from our 6 separate terminal operators, the 20 some odd shipping lines that are calling in the port, and from the major container lines, and get that data visibility safely, securely. You know, we're not just throwing this out to everybody, but a reason to have it. But it comes down to the data consumers and the data users of where's my cargo, because people need to know don't necessarily have the direct financial relationship with someone who does have it. They can't get into a shipping line because they don't have a relationship with them because they are a provider. And we're trying to stitch that all together. And that's kind of the heart and soul of what we've tried to do. And with that, that really gets into helping ourselves as a port authority, hopefully helping our customers, which is the terminals and shipping lines, get that cargo moved through faster. Because what we really obviously have run through in this period is cargo bottlenecks, which is miserable for a cargo owner, which is miserable for a port, shipping lines, everybody. This is not a good thing. But we have more information now than we ever had before to hopefully address those issues before they become big. Or when they do become big, we have a better way of getting out of our situation. And you know, we've seen that happen over the last couple of years, but now we're really in the mindset of looking back and what do we do right and what do we do wrong. But the fact is we had data visibility. We had those pieces here. We had standardized so we can go to the customer base and say, this is what we need from you. Will you provide it? And that's the big question. And then in a safe and secure environment. And you're really people who need to know to make that better decision, because what we're trying to do is we know what's coming at us. When we had this situation in 2014, we had no idea the volume was coming at us. Our shipping lines did. Some of them did, I would say. But if you're on somebody else's ship, I don't know what the rest of the people on that ship are doing. So by getting everybody together, we've been able to kind of crack some of that code. It just meant better opportunity for people to do this. And we're very proud of it. And there's many other people who are doing this type of activity. But we've really come to discover we can't be a passive landlord. We need to be active. We need to get involved. And we're serving our direct customers, but we're also serving what we call indirect, which is cargo owners, cargo associations, truckers, railroads, anybody in the supply chain. We all come together, and that's why André and I are here, is because everything intersects at a port. And that's what makes it so important, but also makes it so challenging. So that's why we're trying to figure out where our cargo is. We're doing better, but we could always do a little bit better. So with that, I will pass it along.
Thank you, Christopher. I like what you say about the passive landlord. Mm-hmm. I think, me as representative of a port authority, I think this can be also a new area with all the disruption that happened. The same thing that similar what happened at the end of the last century, 2000s, with the port community system. Mm-hmm. No? That they were basically promoted, at least in Europe. I don't know so much the case in the US, by port authorities, no? In order to make things more traceable and more transparent. So I think we as port authority, no, should take this opportunity, no, in order to move a little bit forward, no, in this direction. No? Maybe
right. You guys had a 15-year head start on port community systems. I give you a lot of credit for that. We're definitely trying to catch up, but it is it's a challenge, but it's, like you said, very important and a very big thing for passive, not to be a passive landlord, but be an active and do things better. We
say that we like to tell ourselves that we are a business promoter, and here when it comes to predictability, traceability, I think we should go in this direction, port authorities. Yes. Okay, so last but not least, obviously, we have Sergio Marmol from CrossX staff. So I think he's going to give us also a very different perspective on the matters of this session. So please, Sergio, go ahead.
Thank you, Jordi, for the invitation. Good to be here with all the panelists. And actually, it's good that we have port, terminals, shipping companies, shippers and BCOs. We are the same thing. So I assume Jordi and I are representing the same spectrum of participants. CrossStaff is an association or collaborative platform of beneficial cargo owners, BCOs, around Europe, so both North and South. So my intention by coming here was to try to give some basics, but also some platform for what we are talking about on the impact of predictability on the supply chain. And I thought best is to start for what do we understand as BCOs as what is supply chain? Because supply chain definition can be as many as authors. So I think the starting point is that to understand all of us what is supply chain. At least from the BCO perspective, supply chain is anything that happens, that bridge between supplier and customer. And that is a lot of things there. So we're talking about starting from sourcing and negotiating with the vendors, to material handlings, to planning, to manufacturing planning, up to the omni-channels and canals for going to the customer, as it was said before. So all that is a very complex issue, and then my intention is really to establish that when we say about supply chain, remember one thing is that there are multiple supply chains. One single company will not have one supply chain only, and that is when we bring complexity into the picture. Depending on the segmentation of the cargo, depending on that cargo, the value of that cargo for the company, we're going to have different supply chain. It's also important to understand that we don't move containers, and that's important because we talk to container terminals, we talk to shipping companies, but BCOs, shippers, we don't move containers. We move cargo, hence the bill of right for cargo. And what does it mean, cargo? Cargo means SKUs, so stock keeping units. And think about any sizable company that move millions of SKUs per year. And within an SKU can be millions of items or thousands of items. So that is the complexity we are in. So having all that complexity, we take data from our ERPs and then we try to establish prediction or predictive models. We try to see, okay, what has happened and what can happen in the future, or even prescriptive models as well on what I should be doing. Why predictability is so important then? It's just because of that. If we BCOs, we have a model, mathematical model in our system that tell us you need to do this, but then nothing really happens because the basics or premises for that model is wrong, because transit times, whatever happens in supply chain does not work, our model really falls apart. And maybe to learn all this into what really metrics that Jordi was saying as well, imagine that during 2021, the lead time from any port in Asia to the US TP trade or to Europe in the Asia-Europe trade worsened from maybe 8 to 9 weeks in the case of Asia-Europe, shorter in TP, to 12, 13 weeks. So the implication for that is on many things, but one is my inventory policy. So remember that I'm gonna know what is my lead time from cargo production to where the cargo arrives at destination. Destination is the shops or the channel of sales, right? If I predict in 10 weeks, for example, just to put one name, but it happens to be 12, 13, I can risk of stocking out, or simply I need to rush up to produce more cargo, inverting capital and blocking capital, right, to have more cargo or to have more cargo in the transit time or pipeline, right? So that has severe implications. But also the opposite. Imagine what has happened between 2021 and 2022 is the following. Because we come from a very, very complicated year in 2021, those lead times really got worse and lengthier. We then predicted for 2022 as of 2021 transit times or lead times. What has happened? Now everything has improved. And now it's not anymore those 12, 13, 14 weeks, it's back to 9 or 10 weeks. But because my model said you're gonna have that transit time, make sure that you produce more cargo. And that bullwhip effect, that effect that today we have a lot of inventory, is down to the fact that we thought, right, it would take much longer the cargo to arrive at destination. So predictability is so important because of that. With regards to the roles of ports and shipping companies, clearly the ports are those nodes for us where we take decisions upon which where to direct our cargo next. So it's very important that you guys, of course, get us informed. I like to hear what you have done in the past about having these collaborative digital platforms where we can trace information. That is very, very relevant and key. With regards to shipping companies, André, you are the backbone of globalization. You are the backbone of what for me is really the wealth of nations. One thing that sometimes we struggle is that the market forces that you are in with regards to freight and the freight rate mechanism makes that the predictability is also worsened. For example, and Jordi was mentioning about blank sailings. If now the market is that there is less demand for cargo transportation, and then as a consequence you do more blank sailings, right? I'm going to have an implication on my supply chain as I described. The opposite happened also in 2021 when we saw all these delays, right? So the market forces upon which, in order to avoid the drop in freight rate, I'm going to do blank sailings, is really tremendous impact on my predictability and my models, right? So sometimes shipping companies come to us saying, explaining about forces of supply and demand, and we understand, and why they cut capacity eventually so that they can keep the freight rate to a certain level. We understand all that. But the end result is that we suffer. So we need to be careful about those things. In the end, Jordi, and I'm finished because I'm meeting up my time, is that it is important that to understand the supply chains is formed by hundreds of thousands of participants, if not millions. And the key is to collaborate, or to try to collaborate with as many participants as possible on with a long-term horizon to ensure that we can really be connected through digital platforms or contractual platforms so that we eventually have more predictability, and then we can set our budgets, and from that point onward, understanding that the cargo is going to arrive at the time that I thought it was going to arrive. So that's my point of view from the BCO, Jordi.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. I will take it from your introduction from here to ask first a general question to all the panelists. I will start by André, who's online. And taking from your words, you said, and going a little bit backwards into the subject, you said, as we all know, that the situation has improved when it comes to predictability, reliability of calls from the situation we all experienced in 2021, 2022 till August this year, more or less. So I would like to ask first André, and after all the other speakers, panelists, if they can name which they think was the main reason behind this disruptive situation when it comes to the predictability and reliability of shipping lines, and also what should we expect next year in 2023. So this is a question for all the panelists, the same one. So André, I think, and not only because you're online, I think it is wise that you start answering or trying to answer the question, please.
Sure. Well, I can give you my perspective. I think when you say predictability and reliability of the shipping lines, it's I think a little bit too much focus on the shipping line because we depend on all the other actors. I'm convinced that, and I keep saying the same thing, is that lack of shared information to allow more, data-driven decisions, as somebody was saying, over the basic, human decisions, I think is part of the problem. And the more detailed and advanced information is made available to everyone, then I think the better every stakeholder can plan, operations, be proactive, including customs authorities, for example, ports, terminals, and mitigate some of the delays. And I think, again, as a shipping line, we do depend on third parties. We're not alone in the game. So I think this is my opinion, what we need to improve. And it's, it's happening slowly.
You, André. I don't know who wants to take it from here, from the stage. Christoph, okay, please go ahead.
And, coming out of it, we're in a much better position, obviously, today than we were 6-8 months ago. There was, in the United States, the National Retail Federation, there's a gentleman there who described our issue, in 2020 and 2021. It was, we have disruption from factory to store shelf or front door, depending how you look at it. And the worst thing, I guess, in our business, right, is, we hear in the tech world, all these disruptors, changing everything around. I think for us in the supply chain, that's about the worst word we can all think of, because it's so hard. It's a big thing to move. MSC trying to move a ship, it's a big movement. A port, anybody trying to move multiple supply chains is a challenge. And I think that background leads us to today in saying, we moved all those pieces. I mean, as a BCO for you guys, we've heard multiple BCOs tell us in the United States that they did 10 years worth of internet growth, somewhere between 2 weeks and a month. In early 2020, they did 10 years worth of internet growth. That kind of disruption just throws everything so far gone. That's why we have factory to store shelf or front door completely off kilter. For us, obviously it was concerted effort by lots of parties, the trucking community, the warehouse community, cargo owners. But of course, you're producing as much as you can because you didn't know what you needed for this year or how long it would take you to get there. I guess for us, a big part of it is that drop off in volume back to our historical growth patterns. Our 2019 growth pattern has helped a lot in recovery. And merely just not moving as much stuff has allowed us to catch up. And I think that is a big part of the equation that we're working with here today is that. I mean, we think going forward, we expect, no growth or negative growth in the short realm. We think second quarter of next year, from what we've been gathering, is kind of where we'll see cargo start to get back to its normal positions, back to a normal growth pattern of low, for us at least, lower single-digit growth, stair-step progression versus these massive ups and downs. And I think so we're going to be covering, we're still in recovery mode. Waterfront, we're doing pretty good. We got some issues on the rail side, but all being worked through. And a lot of it is because the wrong cargo's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's just because we didn't know what was producing in overseas, and neither did the supplier. They just need to get what they could, and now we're full. So we're making progress, but I think it's going to be, next couple of 6 months, we're going to be struggling to, or getting back on the right track, and we think growth will happen in the second quarter.
Okay. Yeah.
To me, I have a mic. It seems that the other mic doesn't work. Yeah, I have 1, 2, 3. How many mics? Yeah. So, well, to me, the point is that, in fact, we are shippers, and shippers. There are shippers here, shippers there, shippers all over. So, in fact, we are the most important stakeholder in the world because there are thousands of millions of shippers everywhere. But why didn't we have a common voice towards either shipping lines or ports or the rest of the supply chain agents? Because all of us, not only shippers, all the supply chain agents devoted to themselves. So we closed our scope and we concentrated on me first. And that point of not trying to help the following step, I think that that was one of the reasons of the disruption, on top of the general disruption that was going on. So that's important, going back to the trust chain and the demand chain, yeah? That it's important that what happened tells us that we need to cooperate and we need to trust ports as transparency agents, because ports were also there saying, well, this vessel is arriving or not, we don't know, there's a blank sailing, some containers have to wait for longer and then you have to pay more or not. But that's no-brainer. We want the cargo to flow. So to me, the analysis, frankly speaking, is that we had at the end of last year a meeting between 8 big shippers in Europe, well, global shippers, and 8 big shipping lines between the Global Shippers Alliance and the WSC. And while having a relaxed discussion, because it was relaxed, we discovered that there were some kind of trade-offs we could have performed before that we didn't know that were obvious, but were very important for the rest. For us, release containers on time. Come on, if I know it's that important, I may use my warehouse just a bit faster. Or document accuracy, just a small comma or a small whatever delays the loading of the cargo onto the vessel. And also from shipping lines, information on the whole quantity of information they have. They said, tell us which type of information you want, and we can send it to you. So in fact, it's sometimes a matter of understanding. So basic, as I said before, not sending space rocket ships to the moon, but just going back to ordinary transactions and operations.
Okay. I don't know if you want to answer the question or you feel...
Okay, I can. Definitely coming from 2020 and 2021, anything that's going to happen in the future is going to be better. The perspective from the BCO is that also within the BCOs, there is much more awareness about the importance of the supply chain than before. Actually, you can see now supply chain directors and managers being part of the executive committee of those companies. That didn't happen before, and I think that is going to also make that those BCOs try to engage into more collaborative, long-term vision with different participants in the supply chain. I think they will give more importance to the role of ports, to the role of shipping companies. Hopefully, the BCOs and the shipping companies and the ports will entangle into more long-term relationships, not just on the spot, and I think that will create visibility and trustability, and I think that is good for everybody. The BCOs want and need the shipping companies to be strong companies, but to think on us not just that we have cargo eventually, but that we have cargo through time and years. And I can see also BCOs coming together with different participants to gather data, put it in a digital platform, either private or public, to ensure that they can connect their, that platform with their ERPs The BCOs, I think, is learning that ERPs is how you define and work within the boundaries of your company, but your company, it is much more than just you, and this is why they need all these connections to different participants. And with that perspective, I see a much better world next than has been in the past, thanks to everybody has changed their minds and mentality about the importance of supply chain.
Yeah, I just want to add one point. I think there's some awesome insights that have been shared, but just building on, I guess the theme of this is visibility. Where is my cargo? I think that equally as important, and this what came out 2021, 2022, was an awareness. I think that sometime for ports and all the participants in the trade and transportation network, there may not be that awareness from shippers of the capacity that exists. And I think that was one of the things, was a critical learning for shippers, is that ports are not, can't expand, be it the marine terminals or the railways or the trucking, they only have so much capacity that can expand. It takes, years to build that capacity up. And I think with a shock like what happened due to COVID or other shocks that we've experienced, the ability to sort of mobilize is quite limited. And the only way to sort of get around that is strong communication between all the partners and developing that environment of trust and awareness of what is the situation and sort of trying to optimize those situations in the short term. So.
Okay, thank you. I think we're running out of time. I have some questions here. I like to make one general question as well. I was in Korea 1 month ago, and I visited the headquarters of a very company, a logistic provider that works for a very big, basically for a very big shipper, no? And they took me what they call to the war room. Okay, and the war room was full of screens with all the information on the vessel, all the more than 20,000 containers they had at that moment, navigating all over, with all the SQs inside, etc., etc. And I was amazed by the amount of information they had. This was a very big company. We've seen what Amazon is doing in the US, Lidl in Europe also. They are chartering vessels between Asia and Barcelona, for instance. And they have lots of information, and they have been working longer than all of us in transparency, in using data, in artificial intelligence. Now that we see that they have recovered some parts of their supply chain, do you think this is going to be a turning point? The way they work, are they going to even go deeper into this? Is it going to change a little bit what all the problems we have faced about predictability, transparency in recent years? What do you think?
All right, I'll take that as first. Yeah, we as Cross Staff, as this association of BCOs, we also thought about chartering ships, for example. That was in 2020, 2021. We were seeing that perhaps shipping companies would not be able to absorb all the cargo that was coming up. We decided not to do so. I think the BCO's core business is not having ships and not transporting ships. In the end, think about that all of us will have multiple regions where we produce cargo. So you can have a couple of ships, 2, 3, 4 ships here and there, but that's going to cover just a section of your supply chain. What happens with all the other regions? So those companies will have to still negotiate and have contracts with shipping lines for all those regions. So I think we as BCOs, we think we need to keep in our role, our core business, right? And then give the professionals the chance to move our cargo, being that a participant on the shipping company, the terminal, etc. So from my point of view, is what we were saying before, clearly they are changing patterns of production, they are trying to get more visibility and traceability on their supply chain, but ultimately they're going to be using professionals to do so. That is my point of view.
From my point of view, I've been doing this for 20-something years here at the port, and every year we've always had chartered ships coming in from major retailers. I think the difference was in 2020 and 2021, big retailers used to doing this. They were the professionals. They had planning. They've done this. You're bringing in several thousand containers on one shot on one ship. You got to have the background of chassis, truckers, warehouse space all lined up. What we started to see was small and medium-sized, more medium-sized companies jumping into the chartering game without all those pieces. So the professional answer is actually the right one. We think we'll see this going on because we've seen it for years. This is not a new phenomenon, but the difference is when you don't have the people who are used to doing it or don't have the professional piece of it, that is where the troubles come. And that is why we saw so many ships getting delayed, is because random people were chartering ships. Honestly, I mean, let me be facetious about it, but it was random people chartering ships. Hey, I have a ship now. Here, put 1,000 containers on here. And people are so desperate, absolutely, but they have nothing on the other end. They bought some space to load a ship somewhere, and they come to our side, and they have no place to take it. So I think that is the long-term view is, if you're going into that, it's professional. It's thinking through all the pieces. And if you don't know all the pieces, it makes it very challenging. But I don't see it changing, at least in Southern California. We're very used to having these big peaks when it comes to holiday shopping. We identify every year. We meet with the cargo owners. And a lot of times the cargo owners are having meetings that we're involved in with all their supply chain partners saying, these are the weeks we're doubling our volume. You need to be prepared. And the truckers are in there, the warehouse people, the shipping lines, and all the terminals they call, they're all there. And MSC's here, and they're a big provider for us, in particular in Southern California, obviously one of the biggest, but they are very much involved in the chartering game to these customers. And we love it when that happens because they're the professionals doing it. It's when you have ships we've never heard of showing up that makes life much more challenging.
Okay, so I think we're gonna have to leave it here. We're speaking about predictability, fulfilling schedules. So we're given 45 minutes. I think we are almost there. So I think we should leave it here. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, André, from online, for being here. And I don't know, I see you in the next session in a few minutes, I think. Okay, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.